What was your name? Seiful? Seiku. Have we met? You know, you look like one of my old students. Very long time ago. MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair. Allah yabarak fik. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So we took a bit of a long hiatus from the last session. So we'll go ahead and do quite of a short recap based off of what we covered last time to kind of build the story, inshallah. We left off at ayah number 21 in Surah Yusuf. Prior to that, we have reached the part of the story where Yusuf alayhi salam is now have been sold as a slave. He's officially a slave boy, right? And at this very moment, we will discuss a few details on how we can kind of understand the situation in a way where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deems it to be better for him. As limited human beings, some of us look at situations in our life where, you know, we don't understand some of the situations that we go through in life, right? To the point where, you know, unfortunately, some of us we may question why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us in such difficult situations, and we don't understand what's going on, right? One of the major lessons in the Tafseer of Surah Yusuf is that very lesson. Is really understanding who your Lord is, and the plan that He has for you is only better for you, whether you understand it or not. Right? So we covered the story where, you know, he was thrown into the well as a young boy, and at the very moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him wahi. Says, and telling him that one day you will go to your brothers and tell them what they did to you, without them even knowing. Right? Now, a caravan came about, and they told the water fetcher to go and get water for the caravan. And we mentioned that when they found Yusuf, you know, when they lowered the bucket and they pulled up a boy, they said, "What great news! This is great news. We found a boy." Why is that great news during that time? Because young boys were very valuable in the slave market during that time, right? And because, you know, as a young boy, you can shape them, you can influence them the way you want them to be, and they have strength. They can do things for you, and you know they give more benefit if you invest your time with that young boy, right? So they went off. They took him as a bida'ah, like a merchandise, and they stuffed him into their saddlebags, hiding them. وَصَرُّوهُ بِضَاعَةً. They hid them in their bags, and they went off. So we reached to the ayah number 21, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالَ الَّذِي اشْتَرَاهُ من مصر لامرأته أكرمي مثواي عسى أن ينفعنا أو نتخذه ولدا وكذلك مكنا ليوسف في الأرض ولنعلمه من تأويل الأحاديث والله غالب على أمره ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. Now, this very ayah, just a bit of a disclaimer, has a lot of lessons we can extract just from this very one ayah. To the point where I don't think I can finish it today. So I'll try my best to kind of complete as much lessons as we can extract this from this one ayah, to understand the situation at hand, from being in such a situation where Yusuf alayhi salam was in, and a transition to another situation that he got into. And this really resonates with us nowadays, or any Muslim, right? And the point here, before I want to continue, is that I want everyone to reflect on their own life, to reflect on understanding that Allah has full control over everything. Whether we understand it or not, we can understand within the very story of Yusuf itself, Allah actually makes an interjection within this very ayah. So we'll get into it, inshallah. وَقَالَ الَّذِي اشْتَرَاهُ مِن مِصْرَ. The person who bought him from Egypt said to his wife, said to his limra'atihi, his woman, عَسَى أَيَّنْ أَكْرِمِي مَثْوَاهُ أَكْرِمِي مَثْوَاهُ. Make his residence, or honor his residence, right? Make his residence comfortable. Be good to this boy. عَسَى أَن يَنْفَعَنَا أَوْ نَتَّخِذَهُ وَلَدًا. Perhaps he may benefit us, right? He'll give us benefit, just how we mentioned as young boys, as young slaves, you can tell them, go this, go do that, and when they grow older, they have more strength. They can do all the men work within the household, right? Especially for this Aziz, this minister, with such a high ranking level in governance, he's a busy man, right? So he has somebody at home to take care of his home duties, right? أكرمي مثواي عسى أن ينفعنا أو نتخذه ولدا. Perhaps he may benefit us, or we can take him as a son, meaning adopt him. أو نتخذه ولدا وكذلك مكنا ليوسف في الأرض. And Allah says, within the same ayah, Allah says, He's speaking here, and this is how we establish Yusuf on earth, in the land. It's a very interesting change of tone here. You're telling a story, and immediately it just goes to Allah, what's that word? He starts to speak, right? وَلِنُعَلِّمُهُ مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ. And we were the ones who taught him many speeches, or many different types of speeches or events, or as we've explained earlier, ta'wil al-hadith can mean several different things, and we'll cover it inshallah. وَاللَّهُ غَالِبٌ عَلَى أَمْرِهِ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. And it is indeed Allah who was predominant, who was overseeing everything, who was the one that had control over all of his affairs. This whole situation that you just read up until to, Allah was the one that's controlling. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. However, many people do not understand. They don't know this. Right? So, we'll take it one by one, inshallah. وَقَالَ الَّذِي اشْتَرَاهُ. The man who bought Yusuf. In the books of Tafseer, particularly with Ibn Kathir, he had mentioned that the man who bought Yusuf was a minister of Egypt during that time. And his position, or his title, was the Aziz. And his position, it is mentioned in Abu Ishaq, narrate that Abdullah bin Mas'ud, he said that when he bought Yusuf alayhi salam, Abdullah bin Mas'ud, he mentioned that there were 3 people that had very good insight. Meaning, they saw a situation and they understood it correctly. Right? He had really good insight. The three of which, one of them being the Aziz of Egypt, who said to his wife, "Akrimi mathwah," make his stay comfortable. That's one. The second one is the woman who said to her father, the woman who met with Musa alayhi salam, "Ya abat istajarhu," meaning, "Oh my father, hire this man. He's a trustworthy person." She had very good insight because she can read Musa alayhi salam being a trustworthy and good person. She made that right choice, right? The third one is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, when he appointed Umar al-Khattab to be Khalifa after him. When Abu Bakr, at the time of his death, he appointed, they didn't have a council, but he made Umar al-Khattab the next Khalifa after him. These 3 people, Abdullah bin Mas'ud, they said that these 3 had very good insight. Right? Now, this relates to our story today because the Aziz here, the scholars had mentioned when the Aziz went to go look, for a servant or a slave, when he saw Yusuf, he was impressed. And how do we know that? From this very ayah itself, he went to his wife, telling her, commanding her, "Akrimi mathwah," to make his residence, his stay with us, honorable, to honor his stay. Now, to break that down a little bit, "Akrimi mathwah," or the word akrim or karim, can also mean giving goodness or honor, right? Allah huwal kareem. Allah is the one who gives honor, or Him Himself is honorable. In the Arabic language, there's a saying called ikram al-dayf, to honor your guests, right? In a sense where when you have guests, you put them above you. You serve them. You make them comfortable. In every single minute that they're with you, you make sure that they're not uncomfortable whatsoever. Whether it's with eating, or with their speech with you, or just where they're sitting. You make sure that their place of stay and their food and your conversation with this person is enjoyable. You understand? When you say honoring somebody, this is what it means. So, the other word here is mathwahu. Mathwahu is referring to his stay, or as well as his place of residence or dwelling. The scholars had mentioned that this word was used just because it gives a suggestion that the Aziz, the minister, had intended for him to stay with the Aziz for a long period of time. So the fact that he says akrimi mathwahu is that he already intended to keep this boy with him for a long time. The other portion to this, to suggest the fact that the Aziz, he was impressed by Yusuf alayhi salam, was because he said, أَوْ نَتَّخِذَهُ وَلَدًا. Perhaps he can benefit us, or we can even keep him as a son. Right? Adoption. Now you know how people nowadays, when they go to adoptions, They go into the room, they actually scout which one they want to keep or to adopt. And they do this by analyzing the child, the way they act, the way they look even, right? The scholars had mentioned that Yusuf alayhi salam had everything. The way he acted, the way he carried himself as a young boy, even the way he looked. Because we know that husnul, he had good appearance. Yusuf alayhi salam, he was a very good looking person. So he had everything. The Aziz, he chose him because he was impressed by Yusuf alayhi salam. Right? Now, in Tafseer Tafhim al-Quran by Sayyid Abu al-Ala, as well as At-Tanwir al-Miqbas min Tafsir Ibn Abbas, these two sources, they mentioned that the fact that the minister wanted to take Yusuf alayhi salam to work for him as a servant, the two things that he mentioned, ay yanfa'ana, so perhaps that he may benefit us, or the second one being aw nattakhidahu walada, or so that we can adopt him as a son. Ibn Abbas, he mentioned that this alludes to the point that not only the Aziz took him as a slave boy or a servant or a son, he also mentioned that there was some type of training that was set upon Yusuf alayhi salam to take over his role in position. Because as a male or as a governmental figure, back then when you want to pass on your role, you would usually do that to who? Your position in leadership. Typically, you would pass that position on to your son, right? As we see in history, and even till today, right? Like you see the king of Saudi Arabia, for example. They pass it on with their own family members. It's the nature of kingship within, obviously not in the Islamic context, but the fact that he says أَوْ نَتَّخِذَهُ وَلَدًا alludes to the fact or suggests that he wanted to pass on his role or his leadership to this boy. But we'll have to see first, right? We're not sure if we want to adopt him yet or not. And if we see that he fits the description, then that's the intention in the future. Now the scholars had mentioned that because of this very ayah, it alludes to the fact that there was some kind of training for Yusuf. Training for what? To take the position of the minister. So this goes back to the role of the minister himself. The role of the minister. The role of the minister, according to the tradition in Ibn Abbas, related by Ibn Jarir, that he was the officer of the royal treasury, meaning he had access to the banks, to the food, to the storehouses within Egypt. And they say this because Yusuf alayhi salam took that role later on in the story. You understand? So he knew the position of this very Aziz. And this is the opinion of Ibn Jarir and Ibn Abbas. The second opinion that we derive from the Mufassirun, they explicitly mention that this very next opinion, and I want to be very clear about this, is that this opinion is derived from the Bible in the Talmud. Okay? So it's not from these sources in the Islamic context. However, the scholars had taken this whatever it is, this I don't want to call it fact, but this very opinion from the Ahl al-Kitab. So with that said, as Muslims, we don't take it as fact, nor do we disregard it. We just simply take it as information, right? And they mention in the books of Tafseer that this officer was the leader of the police officials, the guards, right? He had control over he pretty much the captain of every single soldier, army, and guard. That was his position within the Bible and the Talmud, right? There's also a reference stating that the Aziz passed away later on in the story. And why do we say this? Because Yusuf alayhi salam, there was a position open during that time, which the king of Egypt needed, right? And subhanAllah, this actually fits within the story. Later, I'll remind you again. Things are put in place by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His servants. Let's just say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved, prolonged this Aziz's life into the point where Yusuf alayhi salam was ready. Therefore, when he died, Yusuf alayhi salam assumed his position. Whether or not that's true, we're not sure, because this is based off the context of the Mufassirun and is not clear within the Quran itself. I just want to be clear with that. Therefore, some of the scholars had mentioned that there was kind of an apprenticeship, right? Like for Yusuf alayhi salam to learn all of these things within the inner workings of the government, for example. Yusuf alayhi salam being a slave, so he's being sent out to the markets and shops, and he's talking to laymen, right? He is around the Aziza, the wife of the Aziz, and with her high class associates and her political group, he understands the inner workings of those people. He also understands being a shepherd, because the Prophet Muhammad says that for every prophet who came, there were once shepherds. Musa alayhi salam, Yusuf alayhi salam was once a shepherd. And during his time being a shepherd, he knew the farmers, he knew the other shepherds. You see, he's a person who got around the city. He was able to go to, just the regular people, and he was able to be amongst the high, officials, the people, the deities, even close to the Egyptian king, because he was working with the minister. As you can see, Yusuf alayhi salam, he was all over the place. And for the longest time, when I was studying the story of Yusuf, I didn't understand, all I related his knowledge from was that Allah says, وَنُعَلِّمَهُ مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْحَدِيثِ. All I knew was that Allah was the one who was controlling over his knowledge. However, if we look at the context, we can see how Allah planned every single step in his life. Subhanallah. Yes, we owe everything to Allah. But now if we actually look at the context, Allah was planning him for slavery. Allah put him into a place where he was being sold to the very person who bought him. And the reason why that happened was because Allah knew that there was a drought coming. And because of that drought, Allah placed Yusuf in the very spot that he needed to be. Now, if we look at the story of Yusuf in his whole entire life, no matter what he gone through, and I'm kind of going off a tangent here. I'm going way beyond the story that we've reached now, but it kind of, for us to understand the workings of Allah upon His servant, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He plans, is going to happen. When He plans, is better for you, whether you like it or not. If He plans, no matter what plan that you make, Allah's plan will overtake your plan. And this is the workings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. as you can see, the knowledge that he was able to gain, being in the position that he was in, being at the exact very position that Allah put him in, allowed him to have access to every single place within Egypt and learn from these different people. Now we understand. When he assumed the position later on in life, he was the perfect person for that position. And look at now. Had it not been for Yusuf alayhi salam, had it not been for him, the very slave boy, the boy that was thrown into the well, had it not been for him, Egypt wouldn't have been where it is today. Our dollar bill, the pyramid on the dollar, it wouldn't be there. Now you talk about like subhanAllah, decades, thousands of years later, it affects us today. In fact, a lot of movies, a lot of storybooks, a lot of people who write stories and stuff, they base a lot of their storyline off of Egyptian context. Egypt was put on a map because of this very boy. That's the power of trust in Allah. That's the power. You put your trust in Allah, thousands of years later, your effects of your trust still happens today. As Muslims, we can only gain the izzah, the honor of Allah through trusting Him only. No matter what, had we have millions of dollars and we want to flaunt our money, or we have wealth, we have cash, we have cars, we have nice houses, and we want the respect of other people just because of what we have, wallahi, that's not going to happen. People might respect you, but not the type of respect that you deserve. If you truly want respect, it's only through the trust of Allah. I mean, look at the people of Gaza. They are the poorest people probably today. The only thing they have is the clothes on their back, literally. And in the entire world has respect for them. Women, children, men, old, whatever they are, whoever they are, even if you don't know their name, they respect him. Why? Because they had trust in Allah. More respect than the kings, than the presidents, than the government themselves. More than anyone on earth. People today are respecting the people of Gaza because of the trust of Allah that they have in Allah. So with Yusuf alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set up everything for him. When we continue within this very verse, Allah stops the story. Like it's like a abrupt stop. Allah is telling the story and boom, He talks about something else. When Allah does this, it's very strategical. The way Allah does it, if you stop and contemplate on how Allah does this, it's very befitting at that very moment. Look at what we were just talking about. We're talking about how Yusuf was established. We were talking about all of the plans that fell into place, right? We're kind of lost in the weeds of the information that we were provided by the story. We're just so in the story at this very moment, right? We're thinking about the past ayats, and we're seeing how that fits into the story, and we're seeing how Yusuf alayhi salam was being brought here. We're kind of getting lost into the story, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala interjects Himself at the very moment that we start getting lost. You understand? Allah does it so effortlessly, in a way where, before we get too far, as the people who reads the story, before you get too far, stop. وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And this is how we did it. This is how we establish Yusuf into the land. Not Yusuf, not the minister, not the brothers, not because of anything else. It is because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All praise and all honor is done to Allah only. Before we get lost, before we get into our own minds and in the weeds of the story, Allah stops us and says, remember Allah, remember me. It is I am the one in charge here. وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلِنُعَلِّمَهُ مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ. We were just talking about the knowledge that Yusuf a.s. was able to get. How he was the one that went into the marketplace, the offices, and he probably even went into the meetings with his master. His master probably had meetings with the king himself, and trying to understand the workings of the treasury and whatever, right? Allah is the one that says, we are the one who provided him the knowledge. Nobody else. The fact that Yusuf a.s. was able to get such knowledge is because of Allah. Allah was the one who taught him. Ta'weel al-ahadith. As we mentioned before, the understanding of dreams, the understanding of different types of speeches. Like, you know how, even in English, if we go to a courtroom, for example, is it easy for us to understand what the gibberish that they're speaking in a courtroom? No, they have a different type of speech, right? If we go to the homeless parks, for example, where they speak slang and stuff like that, maybe a lot of us don't understand them, but we're speaking the same language, right? Yusuf alayhi salam, not only he understood the speeches of the high ministers, of the king and all these people, he understood the speeches of the laymen, the farmers, other people as well. He understand what they needed, who they are, what they like, what did they do. This was the knowledge provided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody else. And Allah says at the very, very end, it fits so perfectly. Allah says, وَاللَّهُ غَالِبٌ عَلَىٰ أَمْرِهِ. Allah. Now, ghalib is like the overseer, the one who has all power and all control. Allah says, Allah is the one who has control and all power and oversees ala amrihi, on the affairs of Yusuf. Subhanallah. Where are we right now? Within the story, I want you to think where we've reached. Yusuf alayhi salam was just sold as a slave. He's still a boy. He's still a young boy. Where is it? Where do we see? Unfortunately, I spoiled everything for you today. I spoiled, how, when you're watching a series, for example, right? You're going episode by episode, and every episode you gotta wait a week and stuff like, and you're just kind of thinking about what's gonna happen next and what's this and what's that. What I just did for you now is as if we just binge watched a complete series. We just watched all the entire episode all at once. Unfortunately, that's what I did. But if we stop and not consider everything else in the future of the story, look at what Yusuf has just reached. He was thrown away, and he was put into a well by his brothers, abandoned by his own kith and kin, right? His own brothers. He was picked up by some caravan, and he was being sold left and right. In fact, some of the scholars mentioned that الَّذِي اشْتَرَوْهُ مِن مِصْرَ. The word min Misr, a lot of the scholars mentioned that he can be purchased from Misr itself, or the fact that it didn't say bil Misra, within Egypt, the fact that it used the word min Misr, meaning that he was sold elsewhere until he was sold again in Misr. From other places, he was being sold left and right until he reached Misr. Just one word, min, gives you the understanding that he went through a series of being sold multiple times. Or being tried to, the person who found him, they tried to sell him multiple times until they reached the minister. And if this was the case, look at how Allah planned everything. Remember when they said, Bakhsin, they sold him with, he was such a cheap person. They just wanted to get rid of him. They sold him for such a cheap price. And if he was being sold to one person and they rejected, and they brought him to someone else, then they rejected, and they brought him out to, and they rejected, every single one of those rejections was from Allah. Because He wanted to bring Yusuf where? Subhanallah. The Aziz. The very person that Allah wanted him to take his place. You know what this reminds me of? The story of Musa alayhi salam. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave wahi to Musa, the mother of Musa, where she had to throw Musa alayhi salam into the Nile River. Right? Out of every single bank or every house within the Nile River, now to understand, subhanAllah, the Nile River, even till today, you will only find high-ranking officials or important people or celebrities living on the waterfront. There's a reason why all of these houses in front of the water, why are they all expensive? It's not for poor people, right? The waterfront houses are for who? For rich people, important people. Do you understand? The Nile River was that during that time. Fir'aun, his very house had the best view of the Nile River. There's something about human beings where, subhanAllah, like, there's something about human beings where we just want to live next to the river. Right? Everybody wants to have a house where they can have access to the water just in their backyard. For some reason. And if you don't want it, if you look at a house and you see a pool or you see it next to a river, it gives you a sense of like, wow, that's a nice house. Do you understand? Even if you have a huge mansion and it's not next to the river, and you compare that to another house that's next to a river, you give more credit and more, you give more credit towards that house just because it was next to the river. What does Allah do when He explains Jannah? I calculated within the Quran. تَجْرِي مِن تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارِ. Allah mentions this very quote. Running beneath it, rivers. Flowing beneath your house, rivers. Not the side, it's right under you. There's a very stark difference between the rivers in this dunya and the rivers of the akhirah. Not only is behind, is in your backyard, tajri min tahtiha al-anhar. It runs right beneath your feet. Now, can you imagine that? Who can imagine that? What in the world? How would that look like? You understand? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this very, these words 35 times in the Quran. And almost every single time He does that, خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا. Forever they will live like that. Khalid means it has no end. Infinitely. You will be in that state, that position, that place, خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا. Forever. This is the condition of Jannah. You see, people have this natural disposition of being next to water for some reason. During the time of Fir'aun, the fact that Musa's basket arrived at the doorstep of Fir'aun, and you're talking about the entire Nile River. There are different homes of different deities, of different ministers. Yet Allah sent Musa alayhi salam to the very step that you would last think. The plan of Allah. The control of Allah. Wallahu ghalibun ala amrihi. Allah is the overseer that controls, and He has power over every single affair of a Muslim. Every single affair of a believer, of the one who trusts Allah, of every single child in Gaza, of every single person who is hurt in Gaza today, Allah is the overseer of their affairs. Allah doesn't need the likes of you and I. We need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu ghalibun ala amrihi. Out of all of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. And unfortunately, most people are unaware of this. They're unaware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan. They question Allah when it comes to kind of like situations that they're in, tests that they're going through. And if only we just grasp the understanding of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works, and we're just patient with it, we will be of those of Jannah. It's that simple. Islam is that simple. As long as you trust Allah with your life. You know, it's like a child on a leash. And they're running here, they're doing wrong, they're doing this. Who's the one that knows better? The mother that's holding the leash. You want to run into the street? No, your mother's forcing you to come back. Allah is the one that oversees your life, and He knows better for you. Just be patient. And that's all we have to do. Now, this very last ayah, or this very last portion of the ayah, Allah says, وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Most people are unaware of this. Now, who's unaware? We look at the context of the story of Yusuf. The people that are unaware of the condition and the affairs of Yusuf are the brothers. They wanted one thing for Yusuf. Had they only known the future, they would not put Yusuf into that well. And they're unaware. They're unaware of Allah's plan. The water fetchers, they're unaware. Had they known what they had in their hands, at that time they owned Yusuf. If they knew who Yusuf really was, they would have not sold him. Not even for $1 million. Or a dinar, for example, right? You know, you have the Aziz and his wife and Yusuf's families. Yaqub even, alayhi salam. Yusuf himself is unaware of his future. They don't know what's going to happen to Yusuf. However, it is Yusuf that has trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, some of the scholars also mentioned that the audience that they're talking to, when the Prophet Muhammad is reciting these verses, who are the ones that's listening? The Quraysh, right? And the scholars had mentioned that when Allah says, وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, is a reference towards the Quraysh during that time. Now, you guys don't even know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is overseeing and He has power and knowledge over everything. And it's kind of like a stab towards the Quraysh, right? As well as us, the audience, the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, is a message to us, a reminder to us today that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts you to test, gives you, things to deal with, you might probably is facing a death within the family, or going through health issues, or financial stress, or things in your life that it makes you stress out. And you're questioning Allah, Ya Allah, why? Why is this happening to me? Why to me and not to other people? Why is my family like this to me, and why are they nice to other people? This is a message, a reminder for those who's questioning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. If we only knew how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala worked, we'll be patient. If we can see the future, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us glasses where we can actually see into the future, and we can see that there is relief, there is honor, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His help is coming. If we can see it, we'll be patient. But does that require patience if we know it's coming? No. It doesn't require patience. That's the test here. Yusuf alayhi salam, does he know his future? No. Does anybody else know his future? And what Allah is planning for him? They have no clue. But here we learn from Yusuf alayhi salam and his father, how can we deal with such a situation? It's through sabr. It's through patience. And with patience, ikhwan, comes rewards that we do not have any idea what Allah has in store for us. We have no clue. And if we knew, wallahi, we will bite our very tongues just to be patient for another minute, or for another second, or for another year, or for another 10 years. We will bite our very tongue just to make sure that we're patient, so that we can see that the reward that is promised to us. Now, the very next lessons are it's a quite lengthy one, where I get into, I relate it to our modern day society and what we're dealing with, subhanAllah. So, to kind of set up the scene for inshallah next lesson, Yusuf alayhi salam, at the very next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains, time has passed. You see the way Allah tells a story? He doesn't waste time. He doesn't waste time with little things. Because the stories in the Quran is meant as a lesson. It's not entertainment. It's not a story we can just follow along and be like, oh, we can see the whole entire story. No. Every single ayah, every single harf, every single letter is meant to be. And for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't waste time. In the very next ayah, وَلَمَّا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ, Yusuf alayhi salam became a man. He's grown up now. And he faces one of the most difficult trials, one of the most difficult tests that any man today would have a hard time facing. And he goes through this test with flying colors. A lesson for us today to learn from his very actions during that time. And subhanAllah, I will relate every interaction that he had from this time onwards until our society today and what we have to deal with. And with that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. I ask Allah to give us understanding of the Quran, to give us light through the Quran, and to help our brothers and sisters within Gaza, to give them honor and support and rain blessings and mercy upon them, inshallah. And I ask Allah that He allows us to benefit from what He has taught us. Everything that I said was good, was only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and His blessings upon us. And everything that I said was incorrect, was from myself and shaitan. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خير.